This video is going to be my first preview of the Ravens-Steelers matchup in Week 11, both teams vying for AFC North supremacy. I'm going to focus this on a particular element of the Steelers' offense. They certainly got some known talents over there on that side of the ball. From a position player standpoint, I'm going to focus this. I'm not going to discuss or talk about their offensive line yet. I do have some different opinions on their offensive line than others who I've heard. Russell Wilson, obviously his first-year starter there in Pittsburgh, that is. 3-0 in 3 games. They're averaging 30 points, just over 30 points per game in those 3 contests. Najee Harris, who suffered an ankle injury last week, he's leading the way with 645 rushing yards, just over 4 yards per carry, which is pretty much what he averages throughout his career. Even if he doesn't play, they have 2 competent, dangerous guys over there. Jaylen Warren, let's not kid ourselves. Jaylen Warren has torn our defense up before in Baltimore, in fact, and then Cordarrelle Patterson is obviously a really big, strong, fast, and explosive guy with a lot of experience. So even if Najee Harris doesn't play, they have 2 competent, dangerous guys over there to put in the backfield. I'm going to focus this video on George Pickens, a big wide receiver, a big target, likes to make plays downfield outside the numbers against man coverage or even zone that turns into man at a certain point. He's only got 2 touchdowns this year, but I think he's playing really well. Statistically, there's some markers that indicate a little bit less efficient overall, but those numbers have changed somewhat since Russell Wilson showed up. So for the year overall, 40 of 65 catches, and I don't think that really reflects what the film shows. He's averaging 16 yards per catch. He did lead the league in yards per catch last year at 18, 9.8 yards per target. I do want to put a damper a little bit on some of those numbers. Make a comparison here with Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman has 31 catches on 47 targets. That's 66% completion percentage or catch rate, or efficiency. Pickens is at 61. His first 2 years in the NFL, Pickens was at 62 and 59% catch percentage. Bateman's at 16.2 yards per catch and 10.7 yards per attempt. Both of those are superior to Pickens' numbers for the year. Number one, I think it's an indication of how well Rashad Bateman is playing. He has 4 touchdowns, Pickens has 2. But number 2, the numbers, the overall output since Russell Wilson became the starter is different. 14 catches on 21 targets in the last 3 games for Pickens. So the same efficiency level, essentially, 66%. So a little bit of an uptick compared to his career mark. But 276 yards receiving during that time, and his only 2 touchdowns for the season. I think the statistics for the entire season are a little bit misleading when it comes to Pickens. I would say he's operating at the level of efficiency and threat level that we're seeing for the last 3 games since Russell Wilson has been a starter. There's a different level of production, in my opinion. Nonetheless, this is going to be where I start. I think he's a real X factor. Almost a bailout option at times for the Steelers' offense. Now, they have outrushed opponents, not by a 2-1 margin, but it's close. 1,245 rushing yards for their offense to only 784 yards allowed. A huge collision of styles here because of how well we've run the football with Derrick Henry and then at times with Justice Hill and Lamar Jackson, compared to how well they've stopped it. Now, I know the data is a little bit skewed for the Steelers' offense since Justin Fields generated 230 rushing yards before giving way to Russell Wilson 4 weeks ago. They're still averaging 160 rushing yards in their last 4 games. Now, 3 of those include Russell Wilson as the starter. They're playing really well overall offensively, in my opinion. Averaging 23.9 points per game on the season, but just over 30 per game since Wilson took over as the starter, and he's guided them to wins over the Jets, Giants, and Commanders. Now, they did only throw for 172 yards against the Commanders, so that's interesting. You remember how poor their secondary was and how we just shredded them? Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, I think, were like 14 of 14 or 15 of 15 catches to targets in that game. We pretty much could throw the ball to whoever we wanted to and guarantee that something positive was going to happen. So them only throwing for 172, is it a reflection of how well the run game was succeeding and producing and they didn't need to throw? I'm not sure. I think this video and this focus on Pickens is a what-if look at their offense. So what if we stop or really slow down their run game? And what if we can get after Russell Wilson with the pass rush the same way we did Joe Burrow last week? Well, I'm not sure that we can recreate that. 13 quarterback hits, supposedly 40 pressures. I struggle to find 40 pressures watching the whole film. I got to like 31 or something like that. But people define or designate pressures in a different manner. If we can stop or slow down the run game, are we going to be able to match up with their pass catchers? Are we going to be able to deal with George Pickens, their tight ends? They certainly got some big stars. A big physical team, to be honest with you. When Najee Harris is back there at running back, the tight ends that they deploy and their offensive line, this is an interesting matchup, in my opinion. They are a team that's committed to the run. I don't see them coming in trying to throw the ball 25, 28, 30 times in the first half like Joe Burrow did last week. I think the Steelers are going to be who they are offensively and strategically attack us in certain places or parts of the field depending on what we've shown on film and what they think they can get away with or what they think they can execute. There's almost like this inverse style of play now because they're so run-centered, so run-based. I mean, it's a poor comparison because no way, shape, or form can you compare Russell Wilson at 36 years old to Lamar Jackson when we were so run-heavy before Todd Monken got here. I think you do have this really interesting convergence, though, of our extremely poor pass defense and their ability or willingness or focus on running the football under Arthur Smith. Is that going to hide or mask some of our pass defense? I think it's possible that it could for a while, but just like last year's game in Pittsburgh in Week 5, I believe it was Week 5, there will come a point when George Pickens has opportunity to make a play. There will. And if we're not in good coverage relationship, or if we're not prepared for his slight push-off, because he does on every single pass downfield. Now, he has really long arms, and he does it in a very intelligent and smart and savvy way. He doesn't extend his arms all the way. He doesn't need to, because he's got longer arms than the DBs that are guarding him. So his frame, his build, his gifts provide him some advantages there. Nonetheless, he does push off some. You can see it, and in fact, you'll see it on the play that I'll show you, his touchdown against Marlon Humphrey last year. He does incredible work on third downs. That's where we'll start the film. I appreciate what they get accomplished with him, to be honest with you. This is going to be a series of third downs that are either in-out routes against man or at least reflect the fact that he can play in a physical manner and he can deal with that physicality. Marlon Humphrey, if you ask me, is the only guy, and or Kyle Hamilton, who I think could match up with him and deal with the physicality and stay in good, tight relationship. But we certainly don't want Kyle Hamilton guarding Pickens if he's going to run these go balls, some people call them moonshots, by Russell Wilson down the field, or even a fade. This is against Terrell, who's a quality corner, if you ask me, and they're able to get that throw stuck in there. This is week 1. Justin Fields, the quarterback, by the way. It's a 3rd and 12. Goes to Pickens for 12 yards in the first quarter. And you got multiple routes like this. I've picked a couple to just illustrate what I think he's capable of. Another thing to mention here, this is a little bit ominous for us as Ravens fans. The 3 teams that Russell Wilson has played against in going 3-0, the Jets, Giants, and Commanders, they're all 3 back-to-back-to-back in terms of points per game allowed. Between 21 and 22 points per game. I think it goes 21.4, 21.9, and 22.1. So they're all right there in terms of quality of defense, points allowed. We give up 25 a game. So do those numbers translate? Do they score more than 30 against us? I don't know. At this point, how do you justify keeping everything intact from a defensive standpoint if we give up 30 to a Steelers team that is operating at a high level of efficiency? But I don't think they're the most talented football team on offense that we've faced so far this year. We got to avoid giving up big plays and then either get turnovers on on defense ourselves, or at least avoid them on offense. Another third down, a little bit similar route, an in breaking route, and then to the outside. It ends up being incomplete. Some would say that it's overthrown. I think that you've got a physical coverage here. This is against the Broncos in week 2, third quarter. It's a 3rd and 10. Clearly, Russell Wilson not on the field. Justin Fields is playing. He's going to take contact on the throw. Very similar setup to what you saw on the last play. He's comfortable in this avenue. George Pickens is comfortable there. He reminds me of like a 6'8" small forward in the NBA who can handle the ball, post up, and move around and isn't bothered by contact that smaller, thicker, maybe stronger defenders try to use to slow him down or keep him from getting to his spot. You can't leave him with this much space on third downs. This is a 3rd and 5 against the Broncos. Same game. Too much space on this low end slant. Great timing from Justin Fields getting the ball out, 13 yards. If we get them to a 3rd down, I think Marlon Humphrey's got to go over there. And then the good thing is, based on what I'm seeing, they do put Pickens in the slot a lot. So if you did it this way, let's say that Brandon Stephens was your guy to pick to put over there. None of us would do that. But if it was, and you put Brandon Stephens over here, first of all, Brandon Stephens is going to be up near the line of scrimmage. But second of all, you're telling them it's man-to-man. The good thing about doing this with Marlon Humphrey is Marlon Humphrey can play here, and then we can play zone. So Humphrey covering him, no matter where he goes, allows us to retain the ability to obscure or hide the coverage from Russell Wilson, in my opinion, because Marlon can play nickel defender. Marlon can play outside corner. He is, in fact, an outside corner. Guys, let me know in the comment section what you think of that thought. I think sending him to Pickens is not like, oh, he's going to shut him down. It just preserves our ability to hide the coverage from Russell Wilson and George Pickens in those moments, such that we can stay a little bit more versatile. We can stay a little bit more multiple and not give away our coverage pre-snap just because we're sending an outside corner into the slot. Let me know what you think of that thought in the comment section, because on third downs, he is one of their most dangerous guys. And if we move Humphrey over to Pickens in those matchups, we're giving up size, but we're not giving up someone who is we're not giving up physicality. There still will be times where Pickens will just use his frame, his long arms to generate catch opportunities, high percentage catch opportunities in some cases against Marlon. I absolutely agree. I think that would help us be able to put Hamilton on Freiermuth if and when we want to. A little bit different route. This is actually incomplete against Asante Samuel down here. A slow release, which he specializes in at times. It's a 3rd and 4, week 3 against the Chargers. Little slow shake route, bringing it to the inside. And you've got to be willing to be physical before the ball gets there. And so I'm not talking about too soon, but just before the ball gets there, you've got to be willing to get your hands on him. And our DBs, Marlon, is what I'm advocating for. If he does run a shake slant, have got to be willing to get their outside hand on his hip, upper body, somewhere in here, just as or just before the ball arrives, opening ourselves up possibly to a pass interference. But his frame is so large. If he's able to get inside position, his hands are going to be able to get to the ball sooner than ours. We've got to do something to disrupt his balance, his equilibrium, his focus on the ball, on anything that's an in-breaking route. I think third down is going to be a high-leverage play. Well, it's always a high-leverage play, but particularly this week with what he's able to get accomplished. Last week, Week 9, their 28-27 win over the Commanders. Fade on 2nd and 10. This is early in the game. Nice throw by Russell Wilson, just putting it in a location that George Pickens can go get it. I don't think it's too negative to say that the Commanders' secondary is very poor. They are allowing less points per game than we are, and I'm sure that they're allowing less passing yards per game than we are. But we all saw what we saw, them trying to cover us. And so I wasn't surprised at some of the film from this game last week. Actually, I was surprised that Pittsburgh wasn't able to get a little bit more done through the pass game. Washington running over the inside linebacker level, and they're letting the safety go with him, leaving a lot of space and area for Pickens to operate on the fade. You can see the ball's long since been thrown. He adjusts to it, makes a brilliant catch, parallel to the ground. 16-yard touchdown. I'll give you the end zone angle of this one. If he's in the slot and we've got Marlon over there, I'd like to avoid this if we could. And whether we use Trenton Simpson normally lines up to the boundary. So I'm going to digress here for a moment. We would normally have Trenton Simpson here and Roquan Smith here. If they're in 12 personnel and Simpson's on the field, I almost wonder if we shouldn't reverse it in 12 personnel. So what's happening here is Darnell Washington is the tight end to the inside, and Washington Washington Commanders, that is, they're not comfortable with assigning an inside linebacker in man to him, so they're matching it. So the drag by Freiermuth is being handled by Wagner, and then you can barely see this safety's feet he's handling Darnell Washington. Essentially, that pulls him away from the point of attack where the ball's going. Now, is a safety going to be able to get over there and play that slot fade and stop it, intercept it? No, that's not what I'm saying, but it gives us the ability to help Marlon on a specific side. So what I mean is if Simpson is here, only in 12 personnel, guys, all right? Not if this is a receiver. If they're going to put Freiermuth backside and we go Roquan and Simpson, we could theoretically let Simpson handle Darnell Washington man-to-man, freeing up this safety to help us out and give the slot defender, again, I'm advocating for it to be Marlon, give him some help to the inside such that he won't lose to the outside as easily because he knows he's got help in here. Hopefully I explained that in a way that makes sense. We could get it accomplished in another way with Roquan here and Hamilton as the backside guy. Switch them real quick, but we won't be in dime when they're in 12 personnel. We'll either be in nickel or dime only against 11. Simpson will be on the field against 12 personnel, and that's one of the things they're doing right now that's a little bit scary, is they're trying to use Darnell Washington as a slot receiver. I do think he lacks agility and doesn't have very much burst. He's a big target. It could come back to haunt me, obviously, if he makes big plays in the pass game, but he moves really, really slow. Another fade, this one against the Jets in Week 7. It's the second quarter. It's a 2nd and 10. I believe they're down 15-12, something like that at this point. A lot of motion, moving people around, not moving Pickens. And Russell Wilson pretty much, I think, knows where he's going to go with the football. He's looked over there, checked twice. Look how quickly the ball is thrown. So when I talked about that last play, that last formation at length, I don't think we can allow this type of free release to George Pickens. He will win on the fade. If he's given the opportunity, he'll win, not every time, but he does win on these types of throws. So I used the Washington play to explain that if we have help on the inside, whether it's a safety who's rolled up or a safety whose feet are here, we, as the corner, can be a little bit heavier on the outside with our coverage because we've got a little bit of help in here. Now this, I'm getting away with one here because on this particular play, the running back crosses face, so there's nothing to threaten this safety. Theoretically, we could read that if we had a dime linebacker in, playing at a little bit of depth. There's a lot going on here, and I'm talking about a lot. My point is, with George Pickens in the slot or as the backside X, I think we've got to be very aware of what coverage we're in, who's matched up on him, and where the threat is. The threat is generally to the outside. Now, I will say this. He wants the ball thrown in a 50-50 manner. There are times where his get-off is, I think, almost intentionally slow. Maybe not his get-off, but once he's gotten to second or third gear on an outside release, he almost kind of stays in third gear intentionally to allow the corner to get on top of it. I think he's trying to open up the back shoulder fade at times, which normally you would burst out of there. You'd try to get speed and then come back to the sideline once the corner is on top of your route or trying to be on top of your route. Up to the top side of the screen, some will say this is overthrown by Fields, and it certainly does end up being overthrown. I think this is an example of him staying in third gear where he could get in fourth, but he knows what he's doing because he's really good at this stuff. And there's a little bit of contact. Right after I unpause this, there's a little bit of contact that prevents him from getting a little bit further up the field to make the catch. I think this is a dangerous situation dealing with this guy, and the only player that I trust to be physical with him and not cede ground and still possibly be in position to knock the ball out, and who's playing extremely well right now, is Marlon Humphrey. I don't think Brandon Stephens is a good matchup for him, but when the ball's on the left hash for the offense, Brandon Stephens is going to be playing to the boundary, which is normally where George Pickens is. Haven't seen Nate Wiggins against him yet, so I'd like to see that matchup some if Wiggins is going to be able to stay on top of things, but back shoulder routes would theoretically possibly be a problem after that. He's lined up to the field here. Normally, you're going to see him to the boundary. It's a brilliant catch on a moon ball, if you will, I guess is what people call it, from Russell Wilson. So normally, with the ball on the right hash, you're going to get Pickens up here to the boundary, but the formation is flipped. You've got what people call FIB, formation into the boundary. Two tight ends into the boundary. where the run strength is, pass strength to the field, their receivers look big. They look bigger on not Pickens. I mean other guys. Mike Williams is obviously big. I think that's Von Jefferson, 11. He looks taller than he did in a Rams uniform. Maybe it's the jersey color. Maybe it's the style. I don't know. It's a 2nd and 17 early in the game against the Jets, who obviously have a high-quality defense, despite having injuries that have put some guys out for a while. They've got a really good pass rush, Will McDonald and others leading the way. We've got to play well, and I think we've got to identify situations where George Pickens is the primary threat. Now, I want to go over some film from last year and show you how well I think Marlon Humphrey played for pretty much most of the game and how disappointing it was that he gave up that touchdown late. He plays these better than Brandon Stephens does. Nate Wiggins has also shown some markers of being a little bit, I don't want to say susceptible, but he's not as bad as Brandon Stephens on back shoulder throws. But they have been there against him. In fact, Yoshivas, whatever, was open on one last week, kind of lost his footing. This is last year's film, week 5. Marlon against George Pickens. And you can see he's staying on the top side, and I love the physicality. That is what we need. Is it going to work? Shut down Pickens? No, you're not going to shut him down. He's too damn talented. He reminds me of an NBA scorer who, if you play really good defense against him, and close him off some, meaning don't let him get open, don't let him be part of the primary action, and he doesn't shoot well. Maybe say he goes 7 for 17 or 7 for 18. You look up, he's still got 22 points. Now, his production hasn't always been as such. I think he had 63 catches last year. He's on pace for an 80-catch season this year, averaging 16 yards per catch. I think it's pretty safe to say that with Russell Wilson as the quarterback, he's going to continue to produce at a high level. Not matched up against Pickens here. Pickens, in fact, is not on the field. The Steelers still love this formation, even though they got a new offensive coordinator. So 1 or 2 tight ends up to the top side with an inverted alignment, so the inside tight end is off the line. And this is Marlon's excellent job of passing the receiver off to the outside. It's cover 2. He didn't touch the receiver. You guys have just enough of his helmet and upper body to see it. And then it's completion to Allen Robinson, who's since moved on, actually to the Lions. Marlon coming downhill. He played really well in man in that game last year. Excellent reactions in zone. If we play cover 2 to that side and we don't redirect Pickens, they're going to throw the football up the right sideline and just see if he can catch it. Meaning they would throw the football down here, rightfully so. Wouldn't you? 6'4", long frame, long wingspan, great jumping ability and great timing. If this is what we're going to play, not the whole game, but I mean on any particular rep, and Pickens is down here, we've got to be a little bit more heavy in carrying this. So it's happening down here, a little bit off frame, off screen for you guys. My apologies. You wouldn't normally expand too much further than what Marlon just did, but if it's Pickens, I almost think we need to. Later in the game, Pickens was able to get things going. This is against Marlon. Down here at the bottom side, ball's on the right hash. That's where he's going to be, to the boundary. So if the ball's on the left hash, he's going to be over there where Stephens is. I think there's something to be said about putting Marlon on him all game, or at least to his side, and at least challenging him physically, making him work for some of these catches. Don't let things be smooth and easy. Pickens is really good at, quote, pushing off, and I don't mean pushing off such that he should get a penalty. All of these guys, receivers, DBs, are going to grab, hold, / push off at certain times. The receivers, at least to get some separation. I don't think it should be called as often as it is sometimes. However, when you gain as big of an advantage down the field as he does in pushing off to get separation, I think it does need to be called. So I'm talking about not this throw. In fact, this is against Stephens, one of the times where he's lined up to the field. I do think it's interesting to look at some of the film from last year and see how often the ball was on the right hash, Pickens was lined up to the field, and it was a pass play. I got 7 out of 10. So it's a different offensive coordinator, obviously. I don't know if those numbers still exist. Still a little bit early in my evaluation, but this is what the back shoulder looks like. We've certainly seen enough of it in 2024. Here's another example. Stevens just a split second too late getting up there. Pickens makes the catch. This is a touchdown, the last one against Marlin during our collapse. I mean, we absolutely had an opportunity to win that football game. Gave it away with turnovers offensively, poor decisions by the coaching staff. And there's just enough of a push-off here that I think that someone needs to at least mention it. I'm fine if it's not called, but it shouldn't be called on the defense either. He's really good at it, meaning he gets his arm out but doesn't extend it all the way in a manner that makes it obvious that there was a push-off that separated himself more so. He didn't have separation here, nor there. But once the push-off occurs, he's got a little bit more room. It's common sense, right? He's got long arms. He's able to make himself available. He still could possibly catch the football even if he didn't extend his arms at all. We don't want to see that, right, when we play him this week. And in my opinion, in order to make him work, hopefully reduce efficiency between Wilson and Pickens, we've got to put Marlon Humphrey on him. We need Marlon to be healthy, playing at the level that he's playing at. I didn't think he had a great fourth quarter in coverage last week against the Bengals, but things looked a little better on film from that standpoint in the fourth quarter. He's had an incredible season so far, in my opinion. Game-changing plays in both Bengals games and possibly the Bucs game, the 2 interceptions in the first half that really changed the dynamic, changed the flow of that one. Forgive me if this video went on too long for a late-night release. I'm working through the Steelers' offensive film and trying to watch the defensive film as possible. There's just not enough hours in the day to get out all the videos I'd like to get out about the Ravens and the Lions. It's an interesting player, and I think that from a what-if standpoint, we've got to try to address it first. Doesn't make sense. Sounds like a really weird thought flow or pattern of thought, if you will, but I think to retain the ability to be multiple when they put him in the slot or when they put him in motion, we've got to have Marlon lined up over him and moving with him that could change the coverage, change the way we play certain coverages, basically make it look like man and play zone at times such that Russell Wilson has to hesitate, hold on to the football when it's not a moonshot. Moonshot, I guess the idea from what I've read about it or listened to a couple people talk about it is 3-step, throw it up. And throw it up really high so the receiver still has an opportunity to get downfield. So it's not really a 3-step concept. It's 5-step or even 7-step route concept, but Russell Wilson's throwing it off a 3-step drop. Makes it incredibly dangerous because in those situations, you're not going to get to him. He's going to be able to get that pass off. I appreciate you guys' time. You have to let me know what you think of the video in the comment section, what you think of the plays that I chose to use to illustrate the threat that is there in George Pickens, how we played well against him in that early season matchup last year, but nonetheless, he still was able to generate the defining play of that game as the Steelers came from behind to win and really outplay us in the second half. If you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this film study look at George Pickens and Russell Wilson, this element of the Steelers offense that we've got to plan for kind of first, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.